As usual, we'll begin with a small invocation prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे मुखम करोति वाचालं पंगुर्लंगायते गिरिमत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्यईश्वरं हरि ओं तत्सत्। Hare Krishna. So we are entering into the day 5, session 5 of Gita Mahatmya, series of 7 sessions comprising of 7 verses composed by Sripad Adi Sankaracharya, glorifying the glories of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So how Bhagavad Gita is the topmost Vedic literature which any human being should study and try to practice as prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita. So yesterday we saw the session 4, verse number 4, where Sankaracharya is stating that it is enough if one studies Srimad Bhagavad Gita alone of all the Vedic scriptures and tries to practice whatever is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. In the session, I was explaining how the Vedic literatures, they are compared to ocean. So one cannot perfect their life by studying everything which is written in the Vedic scriptures. Right? So there are millions of verses. Practically speaking, in modern times, when people only live for 60, 70 years, it is not possible for someone to study the Vedas completely. So that's why the Lord, being very merciful, he gave us this Bhagavad Gita, which can be compared as the conclusion of all Vedas. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is called Vedanta or Gita Upanishad. So it is the essence of all Upanishads as well. So these are some of the points which we saw yesterday on a high level. We will get into today's session. So let me share my screen. Okay. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So we'll pray to Shri Radha Krishna, Lalita Vishaka, the main consorts of ISKCON Chennai deities. Not only in ISKCON Chennai, but anywhere you go to any of the ISKCON centers around the world, you will find the deities of Shri Radha Krishna. So we'll pray to them, pray to their lotus feet, so that we all get the taste in studying Srimad Bhagavad Gita and achieve perfection in our lifetime. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So welcome to the day 5 of Gita Mahatmya course. Okay, so we'll get into the verse. So let me recite this and you can recite in parallel, being on mute. Bharatamrita sarvasvam, Bharatamrita sarvasvam, Vishnu Vaktrad Vinishritam, Vishnu Vaktrad Vinishritam, Gita Gangodakam Pitva, Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma na vidyate. Punarjanma na vidyate. Bharatamrita sarvasvam Vishnu Vaktrad Vinishritam. Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma na vidyate. So let's recite the translation of this verse. I want one volunteer to read this verse, the translation of this verse.
Shall I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, please.
By drinking the Ganges water of the Gita, the divine quintessence of the Mahabharata emanating from the holy lotus mouth of Lord Vishnu, one will never take rebirth in the material world again. In other words, by devotionally reciting the Gita, the cycle of birth and death is terminated.
Thank you so much, Pratap. So again, Bhagavad Gita is compared to the Ganges water. So this comparison we saw in the previous session as well, where so when somebody is actually even reciting once Bhagavad Gita, it is as if we are actually cleansing ourselves in Ganges water, cleansing our material life using the Ganges water, right? So that's the comparison we saw in the previous session. So over here, again, the comparison to Ganges water is being made here. And Shankaracharya also says that this is the essence of Mahabharata. So Mahabharata, we all know the famous episode which happened in the Dwapara Yuga. Right? So that's where the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. Bhagavad Gita, in fact, is a section within Mahabharata. So Mahabharata, if you see, it has around 1 lakh verses, 100,000 verses. So mostly it will be in story form, right? So you would understand how people following dharma overpower people who are following adharma, right? So at the end of it, dharma prevails, and it was Supreme Lord Krishna himself who actually establishes dharma. So that's the crux of Mahabharata. Just imagine 1 lakh verses, and Bhagavad Gita is only 700 verses. But we say that Bhagavad Gita is the topmost Vedic literature. So that's why it is said that Bhagavad Gita is the quintessence, or in other words, the essence of Mahabharata. Because it is emanating from the holy lotus mouth of Lord Vishnu. So anything that emanates from Lord Vishnu is all pure. Anything that emanates from Lord Vishnu is worshipable. Yesterday we saw how the Lord himself is saying in the Padma Purana that there is no difference between Bhagavad Gita and the Supreme Lord himself. Right? So we saw how the 5 heads of Bhagavad Gita, the 5 chapters, the first 5 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is nothing but the 5 heads of Supreme Lord. Next 10 chapters, in chapter number 6 to 15, so those are nothing but the Supreme Lord's hands. And then the chapter number 16 is the Lord's stomach. 17 and 18 is nothing but the Lord's holy feet, lotus feet. So there is no difference between Bhagavad Gita and the Supreme Lord. So here, again, the point mentioned here is that Bhagavad Gita, when somebody recites devotionally, then the cycle of birth and death is terminated. In the other class, I was explaining how this cycle of birth and death, right? So that is something which is binding us in this material world. So this material world is compared to an ocean, which is very difficult to cross. So we require a ship, which is nothing but human form of body. So we saw all that in the previous session. Emphasis here is on devotionally reciting Bhagavad Gita, not like parrot recitation. So when we are studying Bhagavad Gita, the ultimate aim is to develop love and devotion towards Krishna. So initially we all are materially motivated, right? So what is it that I am going to get by studying Bhagavad Gita? So often our intentions and our actions are only driven by our material motives. So I am into certain problem. So what will give me solution to that problem? Is Bhagavad Gita going to give me solution to my material problem? That would be our first question. But we need to understand that these material problems will keep coming as long as we have this material body, right? So Bhagavad Gita can give something beyond this. It is going to give us a permanent solution, right? By getting us out completely out of this repeated cycle of birth and death. So we cannot comprehend what this Bhagavad Gita is capable of giving us. Because all along we are only told and we are only practicing material sense gratification or material sense pleasures, right? So we are only hankering after material sense pleasures. So this is something which we need to understand is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The essence of Bhagavad Gita is to take all of us back to the Supreme Lord's abode, which is Vaikuntha. Right? So that only Bhagavad Gita is capable of giving. So this devotional aspect is something which we all need to keep in our mind. Right? So how I can develop devotion towards the Lord. So I'll just explain briefly the glories of Ganga. So we saw in the previous session as well, but over here I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail. So where from river Ganges originated? So this is the famous pastime or Leela which the Lord enacted. Anybody can say what this Leela is? Who this personality is? Yes, Sunita Arvind.
Vamana avatar, Prabhuji. Hare
Vamana
Krishna.
avatar, yeah.
Vamana avatar.
Vamana Avatar, right? So we know this pastime where Vamana Dev was a small Brahmana boy and he approached Bali Maharaj and Bali Maharaj was so proud, so he put him in his place, right? So he actually conquered the entire material world through his 2 feet, and the 3rd feet he kept on the head of Bali Maharaj, right? So when the Supreme Lord while he was traversing through the upper planetary system. So I mentioned this in the previous class as well, if you all remember. This universe comprises of 14 planetary systems, right? So there are planetary systems which are called upper planetary system, Bhur, Bhuva, Suva, Maha, Jana, Tapa, Satyam. Likewise, there are lower planetary systems as well, Atala, Vitala, so on and so forth. So the topmost in the material world is Satyaloka. So beyond that is the beginning of the spiritual world, right? So the Lord, when he was actually when he was actually crossing beyond this 14 planetary systems, his lotus feet, it actually touched the beginning of spiritual world. So that is where a river called Viraja is actually flowing, right? So because the Lord pierced through that planetary system, that Viraja river, which was flowing in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha, that started coming down to the heavenly planets. Right? So the Ganga came down to the heavenly planets. And then there was this famous king by name Bhagirath Maharaj. So that Bhagirath Maharaj, he was praying sincerely and he was requesting the Ganges water to come down to the earthly planet, to Bhuloka. So he did severe austerities, and being pleased by Bhagirath Maharaj's austerity, Ganga Mata, she accepted to come down to this material world. But she had two conditions. So one of the condition was that since I will be coming with a very big force, the material world, the earthly planet will not be able to handle my force. So somebody, some great personality should hold me first and then stream it down to this earthly planet. So that's why Bhagirath Maharaj, he went ahead and prayed to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva mercifully accepted Ganga Mata on his forehead, and from there the Ganges flowed down to the earthly planet. So that is number one. And the second request was, so Ganga Mata said, I am willing to purify whoever takes bath in my river. But when people come and take bath on me, I will be able to purify them, but their contamination will affect me. So give me a guarantee that I will not be contaminated. I will be repurified. So that was request number 2 made by Ganges, Ganga Mata. So for which Bhagirath Maharaj said, don't worry, when pure devotees come and take bath in your river, then automatically your purification or your, so basically your sanctity will be maintained. Right? So that also we saw in the previous class as well. So this is how Ganga Mata came down to the earthly planet. She came down only to purify us. Right? And eventually this whole Leela also happened where, as I was mentioning, Bali Maharaj, all his pride and his demonic mentality was actually submitted in front of Lord Vamanadev. So, but Bhagavad Gita is much more beyond than river Ganges. Why? Because if somebody wants to get purified by river Ganga, we have to first of all go to that place, either to Varanasi or even in West Bengal, you have river Ganges. In Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you get to see river Ganga. So you need to go there. You need to take some effort and go there. But Bhagavad Gita is not like that. Bhagavad Gita has come in the form of a book, and that too by the mercy of great acharyas. It is available in a language which is understandable to all. It is available in Tamil, it is available in Kannada, English, Chinese, Arabic. So what more language? It's available in all the languages almost. You know, the first edition of Bhagavad Gita in Arabic, it was printed way back in 1980s. Just imagine, the Bhagavad Gita English version is this big. But Bhagavad Gita Arabic, it is so huge. It will be like a trunk load of a book, but actually it is one book alone. It was that big because the language itself is quite complicated, right? So devotees used to find so difficult to carry Bhagavad Gita and distribute in the Arab world. So anyhow, Bhagavad Gita, so river Ganges, we need to go and approach, but Bhagavad Gita is approaching us through devotees, right? So it has come to our home. And by studying Bhagavad Gita, anybody can become a pure devotee and they can go and purify Ganges. That's the beauty of Bhagavad Gita. right? So Ganga requires somebody to repurify her. That is possible for anyone who studies Bhagavad Gita. So we have so many pure devotees who are devotionally exalted. How they became like that? Merely by studying Bhagavad Gita. Right. So we will move along. Right. So initially we saw the glory of Ganges, river Ganges. Now we are talking about ending the cycle of birth and death. Right. So Bhagavad Gita has that capability. So for that, we need to have certain understanding about what a material world is and what a spiritual world is. Right. So in the Vedic scriptures, this has been clearly explained. If you look into the in comparison to the material world, if you see, material world can be taken as 1/4 of the Lord's creation. Of all the Supreme Lord's creation, material world is merely 1/4, which means 3/4 of the Supreme Lord's creation, Lord Krishna's creation, is nothing but the spiritual world. Right? Just to give to some perspective, comparison between the material world and spiritual world. Right? So there is, we are only aware of one Vaikuntha Loka, but actually there are numerous Vaikuntha Lokas. And beyond Vaikuntha Loka, there is something called Goloka Vrindavana. So all this we will come to know when we study Bhagavad Gita in detail. I'm just giving you a glimpse of what the spiritual world is. Srimad Bhagavatam, which is supposed to be the topmost of all the Puranas, right? So it is compared to the ripened fruit, which was bitten by a great devotee parrot called Sukadeva. Right? So that's the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam describes all these information. How a Vaikuntha looks like, how a Goloka Vrindavana looks like. So what do people who reside in such spiritual world, they look like? It is mentioned that people in the spiritual world, they look like Lord Vishnu only. Their appearance, they have 4 hands and they look exactly like Lord Vishnu. They don't have any birth and death. So it is something which is incomprehensible for us. We cannot comprehend that somebody could live without dying. Right? So, and in the Bhagavad Gita specifically, the difference between material world and spiritual world is actually given in one verse in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It is mentioned that Urdhva Moolam Adashakam Ashwattam Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Estam Veda Savedavit Urdhva Moolam Adasakam Ashwattam Prahuravyayam. Ashwatta means this banyan tree. Right? So this creation is compared to the Ashwatta tree, the banyan tree. So in the photo, we can understand that there is this tree on the bank of a river. But if you look into the river water, you can see the reflection of that banyan tree. When somebody looks into river, it looks like exactly a banyan tree, but it is upside down. Ideally, the root should go downwards and the branch should go upwards. But if you look into the reflection on water, the root actually goes upwards and the branch goes downwards. This reflection on water is nothing but this material world. The reality is there only in spiritual world. Right? So here, if you read this, here the material world is described as a tree whose roots are upwards and branches are below. We can see that the trees reflected in the water are upside down. The branches go downward and the roots go upward. Similarly, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Material world is but a shadow of reality. So we all want happiness, right? So I was asking this question in the very initial class. Is there anyone in this call who doesn't want happiness? Doesn't want to be happy? No. Anyone would like to be happy. But unfortunately, since this material world is a mere reflection, the happiness, the so-called happiness in this material world is also only a mere reflection. That's why we are not able to sustain our happiness forever. Sometimes we get happiness, and most of the times we are into misery, right? Whether we want or we don't want, this is what is happening. Why? Because that's the very nature of this material world. The Lord Himself is saying, right? So this is the basic difference between material world and spiritual world. In the spiritual world, there is no birth, death, old age, disease cycle at all. Whereas in material world, anybody who is born has to die. So this cycle of material life. So this concept, you try to understand a little bit. I don't want to dig so much into detail, but these are all explained in the Shastras, in Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad. So why we are again and again put into the repeated cycle of birth and death? What is the reason behind it? The foremost reason is ignorance or avidya. We all are ignorant of our constitutional position. Who am I? Nobody is aware. Right? So we don't know our identity. So that is the root cause of our repeated cycle. Right? So we are unaware that we are not this body. We are unaware that we should be the servant of the Supreme Lord. So we don't have any scriptural knowledge at all. We are into complete ignorance. Out of ignorance, we all develop sinful desires. That is called bijam. So bijam in Sanskrit means seed. Seed, right? So any tree, it is only in the seed state and then it becomes a tree eventually. Similarly, our sinful activities initially are in a seed state. That is called bijam, which means our desires are there to commit sinful activity. And eventually at some point, the sinful action is also committed, which is called papam. And because we committed a sinful action, we get a reaction, right? Initially, the reaction would be unmanifested state, which means we don't get the reaction at the present body, which means it is called aprarabdha. Aprarabdha, right? So what happens? Because I am getting that reaction of my sinful action, my proclivity or my tendency to commit more sin increases. So that's why the flowchart goes towards left side. Kutam. That is called the proclivity, sinful proclivity. So again, I develop more desires, sinful desires. I commit more sinful action. This is a repeated cycle. Eventually, I also get the reaction of my activity, sinful activity. That is called prarabdha karma. Right? So when we suffer because of our past or present life sinful activity, we get reaction to it. We become unhealthy. We get diseased. So those are nothing but the prarabdha reaction of our sinful activity. And the end is suffering. So this becomes a repeated cycle. Example I can give you is a thief. A thief, initially, he does not make a mistake. He has that sinful desire. Oh, this particular bank has lot of money. Why don't I go and steal from this bank? So that desire is developed within his heart. As he starts contemplating on the desire, eventually at some point, he goes and steals in the bank. So that's where the sinful action happens. And initially, he may escape from the hands of the police. So which means the reaction is not yet manifested. That leads to him developing more sinful tendencies. Okay, so this time I was successfully able to rob in this bank. So why don't I make my plan for the next time so that I can rob a bigger bank and earn more money? So that proclivity increases. Again, it becomes a seed. He commits more sinful activities. At some point, he gets the reaction, which is called prarabdha karma. Now, you may be surprised to hear that we all are actually thieves. Why I am saying that we all are thieves? Because we all have this tendency to enjoy my house, my bank balance, my family members, my wife, my children. But in actuality, if you see, who is the actual proprietor of all this? Did I was I born? Were I born with all these things? Did I carry everything from my previous life? No. This is something which was given to me due to my past good activities. Right? Ultimately, the Lord is rewarding us. But everything is a property of the Supreme Lord. So if I am not bringing the Supreme Lord Krishna in the center, rather I want to enjoy everything myself, it is as good as committing a thief or stealing in the bank, right? So that's why this whole cycle of sinful life, it is very much applicable to each and every one of us. Why we are ending up committing this repeated cycle of sinful activities? Because we all are in avidya. We don't understand this for a fact that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. In the Vedic literature called Isopanishad, it is clearly mentioned, Isavashyam idam sarvam. Everything is a property of the Supreme Lord. We all get our share of what we are supposed to get by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So we should never forget the Supreme Lord or Bhagavan in this whole scenario at all, right? So that is the root cause of the repeated cycle of birth and death. Right? Clear? Hope it is clear. Okay. So we are all suffering in this material world due to our past pious and sinful activities. More often, we tend to do some kind of atonement. Right? So typical example is that of an elephant. Right? So if the elephant wants to clean himself, he goes to the river, takes bath, but the very moment it comes out of the river, it again puts all kinds of nonsense on its own head. So what is the use of the elephant taking bath? Right? So this can be compared to all the prayaschitta activities that we do. So if somebody is suffering, he goes to an astrologer. The astrologer says, you go and perform this particular homa, then you will be all right. You go and visit this temple and pay so much of money to the pujari there. So all these prayaschitta and parihara, which we often hear, right? So people tend to follow that. So this is exactly what is mentioned in the Karma Kanda section of Vedas. In Vedas, there is something called Karma Kanda section. How I can be happy in this material world. That is also mentioned in the Vedas. You satisfy Varuna Dev by performing yajna, then you will get lot of rain. Right? So like that, you satisfy Lord Shiva, then you will get a good wife. You satisfy Lord Uma, you will get a good husband. So all these are mentioned in the Vedas, in the Karma Kanda section. So people, they tend to do atonement. Okay, so I have done some mistake. I am reaping the result of it. How can I come out of it? I will do this prayaschitta and I will come out of it. But the problem is, as soon as we come out of that situation, we again go on and commit mistakes. Our karmic activity again continues. How are we going to put an end to it? So this end cannot happen by again and again following this karma kanda section. Right? So this karma kanda is so famous, especially in the so-called Kali Yuga Brahminical families. If you see, for any Shubha Karyam, they perform Navagaraha Homa, Ganapati Homa, this Homa, that Homa. Why we perform all this? Because our house has to be full of happiness. We should get all prosperity. Lakshmi Devi should always reside in our home. So ultimately, the aim is to have more material enjoyment, less of suffering. Unfortunately, we are not going to get out of this cycle of birth and death if we keep repeating this. Right? So that's why the root, okay, so the exact thing mentioned here is the tree of sinful reactions can be destroyed by any process of atonement. But the root is still lying there. How much ever you truncate the branches, again and again the tree is going to come up. Right? So similarly, our reactions is going to keep coming back again and again until we remove the root of material desires. What is that root that we are talking about here? Anybody can answer. So what is the root of this material desire?
Avidya, Prabhuji.
Avidya, ignorance.
Avidya.
Right? So how avidya can be conquered? Only by transcendental knowledge. Divya Gyan. And where do we get the transcendental knowledge? We get the transcendental knowledge from Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is not talking about activities that can be performed so that I can be happy in this life. Right? So that is called prayers. Prayers means temporary happiness. You do this puja, you do that vrata, then you will get all prosperity. That is temporary happiness. Bhagavad Gita is not going to give us prayers. Rather, it is going to give us shreyas. Shreyas means something which is going to last forever. That happiness which is going to be with us forever. That can only be achieved by receiving the transcendental knowledge from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Right? So there is one famous story of Mrigari the hunter. Right? Some of you may be aware of this pastime, but anyhow, it is good to tell that pastime again. So there was this person by name Mrigari. He was a cruel hunter. So he was such an hunter that he used to kill the animals half dead. He used to aim at animals, wantedly kill them half dead, because he used to enjoy them suffering. You know, when the jackals and the deers, they get hit by his arrows and then they suffer like anything. he used to get a lot of pleasure out of it. He was such a cruel hunter. So Narada Muni, the great transcendental devotee of Lord, he was traveling through that forest and he happened to see this hunter Mrigari. So immediately Narada Muni, he could not see the sinful activity being committed by this hunter Mrigari. So immediately he approached him and then asked him why he was committing such a sinful activity. Then the hunter said, "Oh Swamiji, I am not aware that this is a sinful activity. My father and my forefathers, they have been practicing this for quite a lot of time. So I learned from them. Why do you say that this is sinful activity? What am I going to get out of this?" So immediately Narada Muni, he gave the transcendental vision to Mrigari. So Mrigari was given that visions, special vision to see the hellish condition, hellish planets. He was able to see that in future he is going to suffer in that hellish planet because of his present sinful activity. So Narada Muni said, beware, this is the result of what activities you are doing in the present life. Don't continue your sinful life. So immediately this Mrigari, his eyes were opened and he fell at the lotus feet of Narada Muni and he paid obeisances and he submissively inquired, what am I supposed to do? Narada Muni said, after all, you want your ends to be met. So you want some food to be had on an everyday basis. So you will get your food, your quota of food. Don't worry. You keep, you bring your wife and you sit under the tree here in this forest. Keep chanting the Lord's holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. You keep chanting the Lord's holy name. Don't worry. Your basic necessities will be taken care by Lord's mercy. So this is your atonement for all the sinful activities that you did. So this person, Mrigari, he took it so seriously, went to his home, brought his wife back to the forest, and he became a great yogi. He became a great devotee. Hearing this great mystery that this hunter became such a beautiful devotee, everybody in and around the village, they started coming in to see darshan, take darshan of this hunter, and they were bringing a lot of fruits, vegetables, and so on. Right? So this hunter was fed with sumptuous food. His only job was to sit and chant the Lord's holy name. After a few years, Narada Muni and his friend Parvata Muni, they came along. They wanted to see how this Mrigari was behaving now. So as soon as they saw Mrigari, and Mrigari also saw them, he came towards them running, and while he was running towards them, he started to run in such a fashion that he was jumping all along. He was not running, he was jumping all along. So Narada Muni got bewildered. Why are you behaving like this? Why are you jumping? So then Mrigari said, oh no, Mahatma, I am jumping because I am seeing a lot of ants going through this forest. I don't want to stamp on these ants and kill them. So Narada Muni and Parvata Muni, they got amazed that, such a sinful person who used to get a lot of pleasure out of killing these animals half dead, he got completely transformed. And here he is, he doesn't even want to kill even ant. So how this transition happened? It happened by the mercy of a pure devotee. It happened because he received the transcendental knowledge. Right? So the moment we receive the transcendental knowledge, all this repeated cycle of birth and death can be immediately stopped. Right? So that is the power of Bhagavad Gita, power of receiving this transcendental knowledge. Right? So that is what we get to know from this pastime of Mrigari, this famous pastime of Mrigari, the hunter who got transformed by the mercy of Narada Muni. So avidya can be conquered by transcendental knowledge which comes from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And this Bhagavad Gita, as I have been mentioning throughout, has to be received through Parampara system. The river of Gita Amrita flows through Parampara system. Right? So why so much emphasis is given on Parampara system? I will give one practical example. Right? So we all have electricity at home. Right? So we all have our appliances, electrical appliances. Say I want to play a music. So I plug in my music system to the 3-point plug, right? So and then I switch on um, my electrical system, and immediately the music starts to play. So how does it happen? It's not happening magically, right? So I have my electrical points at home, which is connected to my mains, which in turn is connected to the local transformer. Eventually, it gets connected to the power transmission system. Imagine if the cable through this home system to the electrical power transmission system, somewhere the cable got cut. Will I get my power at home? Right? So it can be equated to that. Unless the message that we receive, it is coming down the parampara originating from the Supreme Lord Krishna, unless it is transmitted without any alterations, which is very, very important. There should not be any leakage, there should not be any concoction in the message that we receive. As long as we receive that transmitted message without any concoction, without any leakage, then we will be able to sustainably receive that message. And our heart gets transformed. Right? So that is why the parampara system is very, very important. Receiving this knowledge, so we may be thinking that this Bhagavad Gita is available anywhere on the internet. I will be able to browse through and understand. So that is not how it works. This knowledge has to be transmitted from an authentic spiritual master, bona fide spiritual master, somebody who has not only studied the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, but also living by example. That is why the word Acharya is very important. Achar means what? Someone who is acting as per what he is preaching. Prachar means preaching. I may be giving a class on Bhagavad Gita, but how much of it am I practicing in my day-to-day life? That is where Achar also comes into play. Someone who is not only giving prachar, but who is also doing achar, practicing, is the person who can be called as Acharya. So, receiving this Gita knowledge, Bhagavad Gita knowledge from a bona fide Acharya is the foremost important thing. Right? So, that's how we receive the transcendental knowledge. That's how we can overcome this ignorance. And that's how we can conquer over this repeated cycle of birth and death. This bijam, kutam, papam, aprarabdha, prarabdha. So these are all very complicated cycle of karmic actions. We don't want to again get into this complicated cycle. We need to put a full stop to this repeated cycle. Right? So that can be done by receiving this transcendental knowledge. So with that, I will have a pause here. I will end my presentation. Any questions from the session? Yes, Saraswati Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
We heard about Indra Dasa in
Sorry?
Vrindavan recently. Indra Das Prabhuji.
Okay.
He's a great devotee of Krishna,
Hmm.
and he was burnt into ashes. Though he was such a great Kirtana Acharya,
Mhm.
why God didn't save him? He has to turn into ashes, Prabhuji.
So, what question? So, in short, I can rephrase your question by saying that why do devotees suffer? Would that be
Yes,
an appropriate rephrasing?
yes, actually, that is the.
Right. So, why do devotees suffer? They are practicing exactly as per what is prescribed in the scriptures from Bhagavad Gita. Why is Lord putting them to suffering? So, the devotees can be classified into two. One, who are eternal associates of the Lord, who are devotees residing always with the Supreme Lord, but they come down to the material world to deliver us. Right? So that is one category. The other category is people who received this transcendental knowledge from Bhagavad Gita, but they are put into and so they are trying to reform, and eventually one day they also become pure devotees. Hope you can understand the two classifications. One are the eternal associates of Lord who come down to the material world to deliver us. Example is Prabhupada. Another example is Jesus Christ. They all are messengers of God. Right? So they come down to deliver us. So the other category is people like us who can also achieve perfection by studying and properly implementing Bhagavad Gita. So that is the second category. So I will talk about the second category of devotees. See, when we sincerely follow Bhagavad Gita, ultimately our pious and sinful reactions will be burned to ashes. And eventually we will go back to Vaikuntha Loka when all our pious and sinful reactions are nullified. That happens by performing what we call as bhakti or devotional service. So, but still devotees suffer. How do we understand this? It is like this. So I have my fan running in this room, and I also have a switch to turn on and off this fan. So I understand that I need to switch off my fan. So I go and switch off this. So basically, I go and switch off the fan. So does the fan come to a halt, come to a stop immediately? No, it takes some time, right? But the speed has considerably reduced. Eventually, over a period of time, probably after a few seconds, the fan is going to come to a halt. So that is exactly what is happening with the devotees. Their pious and sinful activity or proclivity to perform pious or sinful activity has been stopped because they received the transcendental knowledge. They no longer want to indulge in materialistic activity. They want to please Krishna. They want to develop devotion towards Krishna, which is like somebody who has gone and switched off the fan. But still, the effect of the fan running will continue for a certain period of time, which means that the past sinful or pious reactions will keep haunting the devotees every now and then. But the intensity of that reaction will be far lesser than what a materialistic person suffers. So that is the difference. Eventually, one day, the fan is going to come to a halt. One day, I am going to come out of this repeated reactions of my past pious and sinful activities. So that is going to come to an end one day or other. It will take some time. So that's why devotees apparently seem to be suffering.
Prabhuji, that means the past karmas, is it?
Past karmas and even the present life. In present life also we keep accumulating karmas, right? A devotee is no longer inclined to perform either punya or papa karma. He wants to perform activity to please Krishna. So we will look into this in detail probably when we study Bhagavad Gita more and more, right? So at this point, I would like to address your question in this way.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Yeah, thank you, Krishna. Any other questions? Okay, so looks like there are no more questions. Even in case if you have any questions from this session or the previous sessions, you can always ask. If not today, we still have 2 more days before we end the Gita Mahatmya series. So you can always note down and ask any questions towards the end of the sessions. Right? So thank you so much. With this, I will end the session. Thank you so much for your patient listening. We'll continue from tomorrow's session. So meet you all tomorrow at 8 p.m. Hare Krishna. Good night to all the devotees.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji,
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. पांचाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः।
Namaste, Vaishnava.